to the second episode of Chillin with Trai. My name is Trai Jefferson, and today my guest is Dr. Reggie Hall. How you doing, Mr. Hall?
I'm good. How are you, Trai?
I'm good. Could you tell us a little bit about where you're from?
Trai, I'm from originally from Plainview, Texas. I've been at Tarleton for the last 14 years. I came here originally to pursue an opportunity to be a student athlete playing football, and decided that higher ed was my better calling than a football player for sure.
Yes, sir. You've been at Tarleton for 14 years, you said?
I've been here for 14 years. I'm a Tarleton alumni, so I graduated from here with a marketing degree in business and a master's in human resource management, and recently finished up my doctorate in educational leadership.
And how would you say Tarleton has changed in the past 14 years?
Guys, well, and so even dating that, I've been 14 years as a professor, so even dating back to my education time, it's changed a lot. At that time, the university was maybe about 2% black, maybe about 6,000 students, and right now the university is double in regarding students, about 12,000, and the minority population, or traditionally underrepresented students, has increased to roughly about 25% versus about approximately 10%. So not only in just racial composition, the campus has just blown. It's grown very, very fast.
Yes, sir. And as a professor at Tarleton, do you deal with any other organizations or programs on campus?
Of course, as a professor, you have your classes, and I'm also, in the last 4 years, I've been the coordinator for Mental Freedom, which is a mentoring program for young African American and Hispanic males, or just traditionally underrepresented males. And so I've been working with the Office of Diversity for those past 4 or 5 years and watched that program. We launched the program in 2012, and now with 2016, we have about 40 young men in the program. So it's been pretty fun.
And what would you say would be the best part about your job?
I would say that part is, unfortunately, it's 25% of my job, the coordinator, but it's the most fulfilling part of my job. I enjoy being in the classroom. I enjoy working with all different types of students, but the reality is some of the passion that comes through seeing young men experience Tarleton as I did as a student, but also making sure that those guys succeed, that they go out and graduate, and then ultimately they go out in the workplace and they become successful young men, both in their own personal lives and in their community.
So, if you could have a conversation with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Okay. That's a tough question. As far as someone personal would be, my grandmother passed away, and she was very instrumental into who I became. And I just loved her dearly, and she passed away what I thought was a young age, in being 60. But if you're talking about someone who is before me, that becomes a little bit more challenging. I would say, my immediate thought would be Martin Luther King, but I remember reading books when I was a young kid, 3rd, 4th grade, and about Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, those folks who were really setting some groundwork at a very instrumental times, and so their books and what they were doing was so powerful. I would say that from that level, it would be one of those 3. So I can't give you a concrete answer, but it would be someone related to those, because they really, sometimes we think we're doing a lot, and we deal with a lot of struggles personally or professionally, but the reality is that some folks before us dealt with a lot. They really dealt with a lot of adversity, that this is very minute into what I do is very minute in comparison to the groundwork that they laid in, and really the fight and the struggle that they experienced and overcame. So.
And you mentioned books. Would you consider yourself an avid reader?
I would. I try to read a lot of variety. I have to do and really focus myself on being a book completer. I like so many things that I will start a book and not necessarily finish. That's my biggest challenge, because I enjoy things. But I read a little bit of anything. It can be not a big sci-fi type person, but if it comes to history, especially black history or those type of, I really enjoy that. But I also like a lot of the professional development type books, the leadership, the things that I think that I can utilize in what I do, and so I tend to read that. And of course, As a business professor, I read a lot of business-related information, especially into the fields of human resource management, human rights, those type of things. So,
if you could recommend a book, professional or personal, what would that book be? Or you can give 2 examples.
oh gosh. One of the books I enjoyed and that always sticks out in my mind is Tuesdays with Morrie, and I can't remember who wrote that. I can't think of his name right now, but it was Tuesdays with Morrie, and it was an interesting book because he was talking about living life, and he had this experience, this man who was dying, and it really made me appreciative and taught me how I need to try to live my life, obviously, and not just live my life, but lead my life in a way that when I do go, that I've provided a legacy, a strong legacy for me. So it was, and not just for me personally, but for those who are behind when you do depart. So it was an interesting book. It's a little bit grim in that regard, but at the end, the focus was that. So I would recommend that everybody reads that because I think that's so important for you to. Beyond development and education, you also have a life that you need to live. And watching in this particular story, this older man was living his life very fully. And I could appreciate that. I'm trying to think of a secondary book that I would recommend. As I said, I'm not a great book completer. I'm a book. I start things. The autobiography of Dr. Martin Luther King. I read those and read his words and his stories. That was one of the most recent ones that I read. The biggest challenge, I read it on a Kindle, and I'm not I want to have a hardback book, but that was a great book that I would definitely recommend to really, it put some context into the civil rights struggle for me. I've always heard of the struggle, but reading the words, I've watched videos, I've heard all the stories, but reading the words that were written and the author, the edited author who was assisting with it, it was really cool because it created some bigger context to what Birmingham looked like, what it gave me, like what it smelled like, what the racism was really, what he was really experiencing. Besides some of the glamour that we see in January and February during Black History Month, you see it looked easy for what he was doing, and the reality, man, to me it was a challenge. I think people have dramatized and placed Hollywood that story, and the reality is that was some real work, and it was a real struggle. So that was one I would like. Yeah.
And speaking of the civil rights movement, would you say with the legalization of gay marriage, the Black Lives Matter movement, would you say we're in the middle of the new civil rights movement?
I think so. I believe as a society it's time for some changes. I think we have to have a little bit more respect and civility for all kinds of people, and I think I think with the LGBTQ community, they've really raised the agenda to the forefront, and it's assisted with the things like you mentioned with Black Lives Matter and some of the other things that we've seen. It raised our awareness a little bit more so than our society has seen probably since the 60s. And so, yeah, I think you're saying a new movement. And also, people are very empowered with technology, with social media, with YouTube, with Instagram, with our wide access globally to different markets. And I think anybody who's in any business or any organization, they need to be more aware, and I think they are becoming more aware. And some of the uprise you're seeing is because people have a voice, and it may not always be the popular voice, and it's coming in conflict with the status quo, and that's not always fancy, and it's not always something sexy. But the reality is, it may create the positive social change that I think we need.
And campus carry goes into effect at Charleston in August. What is your opinion on it?
Campus carry has been something I more or less, I feel like I have not done a good job on it because I've avoided thinking about campus carry, knowing that my students, I assume some of my students are already carrying a gun in campus. I assume that because of the university because of many people now want to have a gun. We're in Texas. People hunt, but I think I need to do a little bit more research on the idea. But what I said, do I personally think students should carry guns on campus? I don't believe that they should. But the reality is the law was passed, and that's what's going to happen, and we'll adjust to it. I think college is such a volatile environment. I do believe there needs to be some more education on the policy that goes out. As I said, I've done some homework on it, but you have to be over 21 to have a CHL. And my biggest concern is that will there be any civil rights issues that come from it? Will people be searched and questioned when they have, or we are going to assume everyone who has a handgun that's appropriately wearing it? Are we going to assume everyone is legally carrying that gun, or will we focus on some groups that are carrying a gun who may not look the part, and that's not race in regards to the way they appear. And that's my biggest concern, is not necessarily the gun, but will it create some social issues and more profiling of individuals, of all individuals.
And this is on a personal level, but what is one of your fears?
One of my biggest fears is to leave this world, and particularly my family, without the appropriate tools for them to be successful. I would hate to leave this world not knowing, to not being able to protect them.
Thank you, Dr. Hall, for a great interview. Remember to follow him at Pragmatic Prof. Don't forget to subscribe to Chillin with Trai and follow me on Twitter at my name is Trai. And y'all have a good week.